And now it's Deborah Cobelt Live and the Sarasota podcast.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Deborah Cobalt Live and the Sarasota podcast. My guest is Scott Ryan. You can see he's at the beach. That's why he's got the glasses, the towel, and the hat. And what a beautiful place to be zooming in with us, Scott. This is terrific to talk about your work. Amazing book, Barbra Streisand, the music, the albums, the singles. You were the designer and the editor on this gorgeous, glossy book about all things Barbra, her singles, her collaborations, her films, and it's all about her music. I love it. A little more to that introduction. You're also here to talk about a film festival that you're going to be hosting in Beverly Hills at the Lumiere Cinema in Beverly Hills, I think the 23rd and 24th of June, about all things David Lynch. And you also wrote two books about Lost Highway and Firewalk With Me. Your Laura disappeared. You are a busy guy for somebody who's doing all his work sitting there on the beach.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're from Sarasota.
Yep.
I'm in Sarasota. I wanted to bring you the beach. I wanted to bring you the feel of it down here in Florida, listening to the drums play out at Siesta Key.
Yep. You know, I'm coming there very, very shortly. In fact, I think you and I are sort of switching places. You're going to be in LA for the festival. I'm going to be in Sarasota to enjoy the beaches. And I just hope that the weather cooperates with me, because why? I like to go down to Sarasota during hurricane season of all things, because it's quieter that time of year. So I'll be on the beaches very shortly. So,
yeah, I mean, they passed that law that the two of us cannot be in the same city at the same time. Therefore, if you're coming to Sarasota, I get shipped to LA. That's just how the rules are.
Yeah, but we made sure to see each other either before or after that happened. So we'll figure that out.
We'll definitely have dinner.
But let me tell you, thank you for sending me this book. This Barbra Streisand book is gorgeous. It's a coffee table book, and the photos are superior. And we'll talk about that a little bit, about how you actually put this book together. But it is about her music, not about her life and all that, but it's about her music and the stories behind each and every song and who's she's collaborated with. I love it. Talk to me about what's behind this. Why did you get behind this book and do it? Big undertaking.
It's definitely the biggest undertaking that my publishing company has ever attempted. I've been a Barbra Streisand fan since the very beginning of my life. I really don't remember living without Barbra singing. My mom was a huge Barbra fan, so I just grew up with Barbra singing in my house. When I started this publishing company a couple years ago, we were trying to think of what we could do. And it has always amazed me that there has never been a book about her music. There's hundreds of books about Barbra, but it's always about her life, or they bring in the movies or TV shows. And to me, she's a singer first.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm going to write a book about Barbra. So I started to do a little research, and I found this website, the Barbra Streisand Archives by Matt Howe, and it basically was the book I wanted. So I thought I'd better be more of a company owner and get a writer who knew more than me. Isn't it hard to believe someone would know more than me? That doesn't sound right, does it?
No, honey. I don't know what happened that day, but go ahead.
But Matt does know more about Barbra than me. So Matt Howe wrote the book and I designed it. And I mean, I think it's the best book about Barbra ever. I'm not just saying that. Like, it's incredible.
I'm not going to do it justice because I think it comes out backwards when I do it this way. But look, the glossies on this are stunning. It is a beautiful book, but it's comprehensive and smart, because a woman like Barbra Streisand, right? For the decades and decades that she's been around, from Funny Girl and before that, right? What goes into everything she writes, everything she sings and produces? I think you said to me very appropriately, she's not just someone who sings. What does she do when she's up there?
She's acting. She acts all of her songs. You feel it. And, just on Sunday was the Tonys, and Lea Michele, who is incredible right now, she's starring on Broadway in Funny Girl. And one of my friends said, "Oh, you got to watch the performance. It's as good as Barbra's." And I thought, okay. And I watched it, and it's really good, but it's not the same. You don't feel it come through like Barbra does. I think she's the only one who emotes every word. And that's what we wanted the book to be about. And Matt Howe, who loves Barbara and works with her team very closely on research and things, he feels the same way about how she just hasn't got, I don't know, I feel like her legacy is, of course, fine with or without our book, but people are not talking about her craft. I think that's the right word. This book is about craft.
I wonder if people don't talk about it because of all the criticism she's had as a woman in charge of her own destiny, right? You call her, she is the number one best-selling female artist of all time. I didn't realize that. That's true, huh?
Yeah, and also she's the only artist, male or female, to have a number one album in every decade from 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, O's, O10s. I mean, like that's crazy. Bob
Yeah.
Dylan hasn't done that, or, I don't know how many, Paul McCartney hasn't done that, but Barbara has. I mean, her successes are unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, ever since I knew I was having you on the show, I've been watching documentaries about her and concerts about her. And even just as a documentary, you feel like you're in the audience with her. That doesn't always happen when I'm watching a documentary. I feel like I'm watching the documentary. But even the way she comes through the TV screen when she is singing and performing, you're absolutely right. She performs each song. It was really beautiful. Um, and you know what I love the most in a way? Like everybody has a favorite. What I love about this book, I loved hearing about the collaborations. She's done so many collaborations. Jeff Bridges, oh good heavens, Chris Christopherson, Sondheim. There's so many. Can you talk to me about that Yentl, right? With the film Yentl. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, one of the things we wanted to do was focus, we knew we were going to do every album, but we didn't want
Right,
the book to become repetitive. So
right,
throughout the book, we focus on the collaborators at that time. In the
right.
60s, she had an arranger, Peter Matz, who did all of her classic early albums. So we focus on that and say what he brought to that relationship. You mentioned Sondheim, who's one of my all-time favorites,
Yeah.
and she has basically become the most prolific interpreter of his work. And so we have a page that will have not just like lists of every Sondheim song, because you could Google that. This is
Right.
more what they learned from each other, what she brought out of what he wrote, and why that collaboration became more than the sum of its parts. You
Mm.
mentioned Yentl, which she did with the Bergmans. They also wrote like The Way We Were and You Don't Bring Me Flowers, so many of her hits. That's several pages when we get to that, because those are really her lifelong friends and collaborators.
I loved Yentl. I was very, very young when that came out, and I remember watching that and just being in awe because that was all her film, everything about it. And I know that that was particularly close to her heart. And then reading afterwards, oh, she's so difficult to work with. And even as a young girl, I thought, no, she's not, because she's a woman. People were saying that about her, right? Could you imagine saying that about a male director at the time? It just doesn't happen.
No,
Talk to me
it
a little
doesn't
bit
at
of
all.
that.
And, I'm that makes me so angry, because what we should be looking at is that Yentl was the first picture that was written, directed, starred, produced, and the songs were sung by a person. If that was a man, if Martin Scorsese did that, if Steven Spielberg did that, Yentl would be streaming everywhere. And instead, it's really actually hard to find Yentl in
Is it
any.
really? Oh, I didn't
Yeah, like
realize it
the
because
Blu-ray is sold out. It doesn't stream. I mean, it's the
oh
difference
wow.
between how people view a male versus a female icon, which is why this book was so important to me to get done and get out there. And our first printing sold out. Like
Yeah.
before it went on sale, our first printing was sold out, which has never happened to us in our company's existence.
Well, that's why when I saw that you were doing this book, I immediately texted you. I'm like, I need a copy. You're like, well, are we doing an interview? I'm like, yeah, we're doing an interview. I need a copy. I love this book. Like, I'm so proud of it. It goes from my living room to my den. And, my husband, we were
Of course.
watching again the documentaries this weekend. He goes, gosh, I've never seen Yentl. So we're going to go looking for it. I'm just letting you know, Scott. Let me know where I can find it because we're going to, it's going to have a resurgence. I'm going to tell everybody to go out. That was my favorite when I was younger. I thought it
Well,
was
and it's
balls.
really good. I have three daughters, and when they were all between the ages of 9 and 11, I showed them Yentl, and I suggest that parents do this, and they were
Oh,
flabbergasted that women couldn't read. They actually, like, I had to pause because they didn't understand, what do you mean it was illegal for women to read? And it's important for young girls to see how far they've come and how much farther women need to come in our society. And as far as how people treat Barbra is certainly proof of it.
but she's persevered nonetheless because of her talent. I think she just stands off to the side and says, okay, say what you want about me. I'm going to move forward. And for that reason, also, she doesn't do a lot of interviews, right? She hasn't done, I don't believe, a book of her own. Am I right about that?
You are right, but it's coming this November. So she is releasing her first autobiography. It is coming out this November. We were sort of scared. We were prepping our book. And as I say, Matt, he helps what they call Team Barbra. So he knew a book was coming. And I was just like, please don't let her book come out the same time as ours. So luckily ours came out earlier in the year, and we're stepping aside. And by all means, get Barbra's book. Her book is about her life. As you said, our book is not about her life. It's about her work and only her music career. We do not get into who she slept with, what her mother did. That stuff, to me, that's for Barbra to tell, not for us to tell. This is a look at every song, every album.
Let's go back, if you will, to the collabs, can we? Because also John Peters, Redford, Andy Gibb. I mean, you think about all this and you say, oh, yeah, because you're right. It's been decades that she's been with us performing. Jeff Bridges, Marvin Hamlish. Gosh, we lost him, and I just thought he was spectacular.
It
Um,
was.
what was the word about how she got along with her fellow artists?
I mean, honestly, I've never heard any of them say anything bad. It is
No.
always the press that says
Yep.
something negative.
Hmm.
I'm actually working on a book that I'm writing about films from the 90s. And in it,
Mm.
I'm covering The Prince of Tides, which Barbra directed. And in doing research, I found this story that she recently shared about how she had to convince the cinematographer to get the shots. And she was telling another director this story that was interviewing her. And he's like, why didn't you fire him? And she's like, because I can't fire someone. They'll go to the papers and say that I'm a difficult person. Like, I have to learn to work around these men and get men to do what I want them to do. Again, Francis Ford Coppola doesn't have to deal with that.
No, it brings me back to when I was on the field as a reporter. Okay, I'm no Barbara, but a lot of my cameramen were men. And I would be like, oh, could you get that shot over there? Because I know what I'm going to write about, right? And they'd be like, oh. And I did watch my male counterparts do the same thing. And they didn't get that, and I could tell, they probably think I'm a little difficult because I want a shot over here. I want a shot over there. But you visually know what you're going to write to. And she did the same thing. And people who are
Of
watching this,
course.
very common for women to go through. So just that's just the way it is. I do think because of the work she's done, I think that is starting to not happen as much. Am I right about that? That men
Yeah, I
and
mean,
women are
I saw an
go.
interview in doing research for this with Julia Roberts, where you wouldn't really think that Julia was going to talk about Barbra, but she said that Barbra took a machete through Hollywood that Julia got to walk through. And I was
Yeah,
like, how really cool that Julia Roberts is giving Barbra that credit, because I don't hear that very often. But I think that her sheer force of what she's done is incredible. And to have the talent to back it up, which
yeah.
again, this is just about the music, but as a director, as an actress, I mean, The Way We Were is one of the most classic love stories of all time as a film. We could have covered that, and I keep pushing Matt to do. I'm like, we could do Barbara the actress next, but to have that follow-up book. But she still, at the heart of it all, to me, is the single greatest singer of all time. No offense to Frank Sinatra, but I just think what Barbara brought to things is unbelievable.
Her voice is silky, and you're right. If you close your eyes and listen to her singing, you are immediately immersed into where she's going, right? What she's talking about. Let's talk about people, right? People who need people. What a beautiful song, right? Talk to me about that one.
Well, it's certainly her most famous song. And like in the book, we do collaborators. We also have a thing called Signature Streisand. And
Right.
so we pick somewhere around 20 songs that she's known for. People is certainly the one she's known most for. Barbara comically says when she first heard this song, she said, wouldn't it be people who don't need people would be the luckiest people in the world? Which makes
I
you
love
think,
that.
maybe. But what's fascinating is if you look at how she did it at her 1994 concert versus her 2000 concert versus her 2006 concert, it's different every time.
Yeah.
Every time she sings it, she kind of ties it to what's going on in our society, whether there were hurricanes or, whatever
Mm.
was going on politically. She kind of always ties that song into it. And then it's interpreted through that lens. She doesn't, I love Billy Joel. He's one of my favorites. But if you go see Billy Joel, I'm telling you, Piano Man's going to sound the same every single night.
Mm.
That doesn't happen at a Barbara concert.
Interesting. What's your personal favorite, or two or three?
Well, my favorite song is is one that nobody knows really. It's off the movie album, and it's called You're Gonna Hear From Me. And out of all of her songs, it's the song that sort of speaks to me. I'm sure the first
Mm.
time I was on your show, I was probably nervous because I hadn't met you and now we're like buddies. But like if I have to do something that's just that step out of where I'm comfortable, it's a song that says like, you're going to hear from me. No one's going to sit me in the corner. I can do this and it doesn't matter what happens. And man, you put that on and it it gets me ready to do that thing that I'm afraid to
Yeah.
do. And she
Yeah.
has so many songs like that. So that's my all-time favorite Barbara song. Second would probably be a song called Putting It Together, which is from the Broadway album. And it's a Sondheim song, which is about art. And, when I'm working on a project, the idea of putting all the things together um, makes a big difference to me. And I think the Broadway album is her best album ever. It came out in 1985, and it was her returning to her Broadway roots.
Mm. One of my favorites performances of hers ever was the first time I saw Funny Girl. I kind of couldn't believe the story. I didn't know the story, right? I was a little kid. I thought she was magnificent in it. And once again, the press was going on and on and on about her nose. And I remember thinking, what about her nose? I actually thought she was so and is so beautiful. And I thought, man, it's amazing this woman will walk out in public because that was what I kept reading about. Do you remember that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just how people are. And I think that it's hard for young people today
Yeah,
to wrap their head around how different of a look Barbara had when she burst onto the scene in the early 60s.
yeah,
And she didn't want to look like Doris Day or Grace Kelly or whoever, was on the movie screen. She looked
yeah,
like herself. She did her makeup by pulling the eyeliner up farther than everyone else. She was wearing her clothes and she didn't want to change her name or hide her Jewish heritage. And I think that's why she means so much to people that sort of were forced to hide who they were back in the 60s.
yeah. And I think it's very important for people today. The reason why I keep mentioning this and all that she's gone through, particularly being a woman, right, is because she persevered. And with all that's going on nowadays with social media and young people feeling just awful about themselves, you have someone like her who really could have folded. and just said, no, I'm going to keep going. And from what I understand, please don't quote me, she got a lot of that even from her own family. Right. And it was rough for her, but she did continue. So, she's somebody who could be an inspiration to so many of us, not just myself, but somebody younger. And she continued on. How many songs throughout her entire career did she record? And how many total
I, I
albums?
I don't, I should know that because I designed the book, but I think it's kind of over 70 albums, I feel like.
My gosh.
In designing it, I literally worked on this book every day of 2022. I
Yeah.
started designing it in January and I put it to bed on December 31st on 2022. And it was just like every day, because as you mentioned, there are so many pictures in here, and Matt has an incredible collection of Barbra pictures. And we do every song, every producer, and he goes through each song. We do it's in decades.
Yeah.
And I mean, the file was humongous. My little laptop was like, are you kidding me here? And
Yeah.
I wanted it to be beautiful. There's your Yentl and her with Barry Gibb, of course, for Guilty, which was her best-selling album of all time, and that was in 1980.
Yeah. But
So it was just so much work, but I also was like the greatest man I ever had.
yeah. Wow. I just, when I first got it, as I said, this is sort of a must for people. This is still around, right? If people go to your
Well,
website and order it.
right. So here's the thing. Like I
Yeah.
said, the first printing sold out before it was released. The second
Mm,
printing is coming in next week.
okay.
And about half of those books are already spoken for through bookstores. There's not going to be a third printing. This book is
Mm,
going to sell out and then it's going to be gone. So you can go to tuckerdspress.com and we'll get you a copy, but this isn't the kind of thing you want to think about. We're not here trying to force this book on anyone because they're going to sell out and they're going to be gone. I've talked to the author about it. He kind of wants it to be this limited edition, cool collector's item. I mean, there is an ebook which will last forever, but it's not going to be as beautiful. I mean, you want to
no,
feel
I'm telling you.
it.
Yeah. What did you learn from doing this book? And how did you even compile it? How did you put this together? It's so comprehensive. The fact that you even gave me a moment in time to go to dinner in Sarasota last year is amazing, because I'm surprised you weren't working on this just before we met at the restaurant.
Yeah, well, I probably blabbed about it a lot through dinner. My brain was really on Barbra. And, I would put that album on while I would work on that album. So I actually listened to
Oh,
all of them as well, which we do suggest to readers in the front part of the book that they do, because as Matt is going through the album,
hmm.
it's good to listen to as he's pointing things out. But to be honest, I don't know how I did it. It was scary, and Matt was very helpful because we picked three albums to start with, and I think I gave him three different versions and said, "How do we want to do this?" And then once we locked it in, then we move forward. But he knows so much about Barbra, and I know a decent amount. So together we could say, oh, you forgot that. Did I forget that? Oh yeah, get that. We were back and forth all the time. So that helps. I mean, I think my
And
wife's a little sick of Barbra, to be honest with you. She's like,
yeah.
we have just a break on listening to this. Let's put it aside a little bit.
Yeah, and again, when you say Matt, that's Matt Howe.
Matt
I
Howe,
want to
he
give a
wrote the book.
big shout out to him. A tremendous, tremendous body of work. Um, let's talk a little bit about you and your entire process.
Finally.
As your please, I know. So, how did you even get into doing this? I mean, you've got your own publishing company. This is not your first go around. And then we're going to segue into David Lynch and what you're about to embark upon here in Beverly Hills. So, how did you get into doing all this?
It kind of fell into my lap with getting interviews about 30 something. I mean, it is so weird that I'm this writer and this publisher now, because that isn't where I thought my path was going to be at
Hmm.
at all, but I was just a podcaster, and I ended up getting an interview with Richard Kramer, who is one of the executive producers on 30 Something. And that led to me interviewing everyone from 30 Something. When I had all that information, I was like, I might as well do a book. All of that was just 6 years ago. And now
Wow.
I've done all this stuff in 6 years. It's crazy.
Including a book about David Letterman, including a book about moonlighting, which I've interviewed you about. That's a phenomenal book. And you spoke quite a bit to Sybil Shepherd for that book, which is incredible. And at the time, right, we weren't quite sure why was Bruce Willis not really getting in touch. And then shortly after that, we found out, sadly, that he hasn't been well. That made me feel so awful, right, when I heard that about him.
Yeah, and I actually did know that when I was doing press for Moonlighting,
Oh,
but it wasn't my place to
no.
tell. And
Yeah.
so, I would have these interviews. You were certainly not one of them, but I would have them on other places where they were like, Bruce Willis must be a jerk to not be in this book. And I kept saying, no, we don't always know what's going on with people. But I knew it wasn't my place to say, I know that Bruce wanted to be a part of the book. He just physically
Couldn't.
wasn't able to be.
Couldn't do it. Well, in my interviews, I never presume anything. You never know what anybody's going through. You never know their story. So I just don't. So it's best for anybody interviewing somebody to just leave it out. You
Right.
don't know what you're talking about necessarily. So, yeah. So there's so many. How many books total now have you done?
This 90s book is my ninth book, which I is ridiculous.
Wow.
It's just
Wow.
so crazy. And I need to slow down. I need to be at the beach.
You need to be at the beach. That's okay, because when you come back from Beverly Hills, maybe we'll meet at the beach. But Barbara, did she get in touch with you with this book? Did you hear from her or her people or something? Because let me tell you, while I know she doesn't like to do many interviews, getting a hold of this one is beautiful. I'm surprised she didn't call up and say, Scott,
Well,
tell me.
Matt and I do a YouTube series where we had talked about every album, and we had on her executive producer, her concert director. We're now working on coming back, and we're trying to get a couple surprise guests. And
Ooh,
I've talked to Matt. He's met Barbara a couple times, and he's contacted with her. I have not. But with her having a book coming out this November, I'm like, Matt, I feel like we should get Barbara on our little YouTube series. I mean, why
mm.
not?
Did you
What
send
do
a
you think?
copy to her people? I'm sure you did.
Yes, yes. And Jay Landers, he wrote the foreword to this book. He's been in the studio with Barbara at every recording since 1991, 92. He loved it. He said, Barbara loves it. Barbara said, let our PR people at Columbia help, give them whatever they want. Again, in a world where everybody says nasty things about Barbara, as you mentioned, I've done so many books about different topics. No one has been as helpful to me as Barbara has been. Um,
Mm.
Most people, they don't want to get close to that book. And it's not like Barbara's gonna, schlep our book at the local supermarket or something. I mean, but she never stood in our way and she supported us. That meant a lot to me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Talk to me about the two David Lynch books that you wrote and the upcoming, I'll call it Film Festival in Beverly Hills. That will be June 23rd and 24th. Very exciting, please.
Yeah, these are books I actually wrote and I designed them as well. And they are just as beautiful as the Barbara book because they're also in color and on the same paper because that's how I like to do my books. I like them to be colorful. So I'm a big David Lynch fan. He did Twin Peaks, and
Incredible.
then they did a movie called Firewalk With Me based on that. And then his follow-up movie was Lost Highway with Patricia Arquette. Both books are books where I interviewed the cast and crew, just like Moonlighting and my Letterman books. And it's just like, how do you work with an artist like David Lynch, who's one of the most avant-garde directors of our time? And how do you create a piece of art that is not just like a superhero movie, but, something a little more complex? So I
Yeah.
will be out in Beverly Hills on June 23rd and 24th with some of the people who are in the book. and we're going to screen the movie and then do a live Q&A with the audience, and then I'll be there signing and selling books after that.
Any surprise guests that anyone can expect, or is it a surprise?
No, we have Natasha Gregson Wagner, who's actually Natalie Wood's daughter. She stars in Lost Highway. She's going to be there. Debbie Zoller, who just won an Emmy for Fosse Verdon. She did the makeup for Lost Highway. She's going to be there. Peter Deming is the DP, and his work in Lost Highway is amazing. And then on the Firewalk With Me night, we have Mike Malone, who is the set dresser for all of Twin Peaks, and George Griffith from Twin Peaks will be there as well. So we've definitely got some David Lynch people that are going to be there. But I mean, also me. That's pretty big. And I don't know, maybe I'll wear my hat, maybe I won't.
No. Let me just circle back for a second to the 90s book. What's that going to be about?
Yeah, so that's coming out next year. It's called The Last Decade of Cinema, and I'm covering 25 movies from the 90s and how they were unique and grown up, and back when they made movies, first of all, on film and for adults. There are no superheroes here. There are no, Fast and Furious action movies. These were complex characters, and I long for that kind of art. So I have some great interviews with some screenwriters from that time. And it's just me being an old man sitting on the porch saying, what about when I was young and movies were good? So I think...
Don't forget to include the film that I was in with Wes Craven's New Nightmare, starring me, tiny role. So please look it up, people. I'm sure that it'll be in Scott's book, highlighted.
I mean, it's going to be on the front cover.
It has to be. I just wanted to give you a tip. But I also want to say all of your books, including this upcoming one about the 90s, such a positive view of the work, including David Letterman. You didn't decide to go down any roads that weren't positive. You keep to the work. And that's what I like about this, especially in this day and age when people would like to gossip about anything. We all have something. Maybe not you, but everybody's got something, right? What's great about your books, whether it's about David Lynch, David Letterman, Barbra Streisand, you really get intimate into the details of the work. And I love that. I love that about you. And I want to thank you for doing that, for keeping it that way, because you also give a lot of detail.
Thank you. And I do that on purpose. And every one of my books ends with the plea for kindness. And whenever I go out, I talk about kindness and I spread that word, because everyone complains about how our society is getting meaner. But you know who can control that? You can. You can just not be mean anymore. And the Moonlighting book is a great example, because everybody wants to think Bruce Willis and Sybil hated each other, except they didn't. They were just actors, and it was just a show. And I don't want to waste my time on the negative. Look at all the positive that show did. And to me, that's what art does. It bonds us together, teaches us to empathize with one another. And I want to focus on that positivity.
I love that, Scott. Now let's talk about Sarasota. You're sitting there on Siesta Key Beach.
Sand between my toes. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Why did you move to Sarasota? Because you've only been there really just so many years, right?
Yeah, just under 2. Honestly, I've came here my whole life.
Yeah.
When I was a little kid, my parents came here every April. We were always here. And I said I was going to move here when I got old. And now I'm here. Wait a minute. Does that mean I'm old? But
I don't know.
I wanted to live somewhere that was beautiful. I lived in Ohio and it's gray and it rains, and here it is just beautiful. And I love it every single day.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. And I look forward to coming down there. And I know we're going to be seeing each other. Just to let you know how Scott and I have gotten to know each other. I grew up down there, and I am forever looking for another home. Ever since I sold my parents' home, I'm kicking myself because it's gotten a little expensive down there. And remember, one day I called you and your wife, and you ran over to a house that I was looking at, and you're going in the back and you're taking pictures and videos. Hysterical. I really should have.
And we got arrested. And then I said, could you bail us out? And you said, no, I don't want to get involved. I'm a big time person here, Scott. Call someone else. Yeah, I remember.
No, that didn't happen. But I mean, even on a dime, I called them up and I'm like, "Did you go see this house for me?" But that was quite nice of you. So thank you very much. So we're coming down there. Next week we're still looking. So we'll let you know what we come up with. And I look forward to seeing both of you when we come down there to Sarasota. We'll go to one of our favorite restaurants. For me, it's Epicure. So
Of
I look forward
course.
to doing that. Yeah, I look forward to everybody. Pick up this latest book, please. Barbra Streisand, the music, the albums, the single. It's just fantastic. It's a beautiful book, and I just adore it. I really, really do. And if you're in California, please go to the film festival, June 23rd and 24th. Scott will be there. There's going to be lots of surprises. I really think it's going to be such an interesting festival. And I think it's great that you're coming out here to do that. I really do. Following your passion for sure.
I don't know how to do anything else. I learned it from Barbara. She's been singing positive affirmations in my ear since I was a little kid, and I honestly think that's made a big difference.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Scott. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for being here for our podcast today on Deborah Cobalt Live, simulcasting on the Sarasota podcast. You'll find our interview with Scott. There you go. Don't forget the glasses and the towel. Because now you look like a cowboy. So you need your sunglasses. Now you look like you're ready for the beach. There you go. Do you have your sunscreen? No sunscreen.
I got it.
You got your sunscreen on. Okay. You can find our show on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and then it's transferred over into an audio podcast. You can go to iHeartRadio, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, and just put in Deborah Cobalt Live, the Sarasota podcast, and you'll find us. Very much looking forward to seeing everybody. And remember, pick up the book, Barbra Streisand, The Music. I'm Deborah Zara Cobalt, your host. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next time.